Here we are, 2 weeks out, the 2-week warning, you could call it. Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of the other two teams in town that I cover, the Penguins and the Pirates. I hope you'll take the time to check those out as well. July 23 is the date that all players are required to report to St. Vincent College for training camp. The first actual practice comes the following day, the closest thing that there is to actual football on reporting date being the run test. We've spent a lot of time here, especially in recent weeks, going over individual players, individual positions. I would normally say individual battles, except that I just don't see this camp materializing that way, at least not anymore. Certainly not with the acquisitions of Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. But if you want to know where an actual challenge is going to be put forth, and I don't know that that has to come from Mike Tomlin or any team leadership or anything, it's just going to happen. That's that these guys have to get it together. They have to become a team. Now go right ahead and roll your eyes at the intangible. There's no hot takes in this. There's no speculation. There's no pretending that there's going to be some kind of issue in getting TJ Watt signed just for the sake of stirring up discussion and debate and engagement. What I'm about to share with you is something that's really real to those guys on the inside. Because when you talk to the players, whether they're great players, whether they're special teams guys who were only out there for 1 or 2 years, and you ask them about Latrobe and the experience that they had out there, almost without exception, what you're going to get back is something camaraderie, something chemistry, something life lessons. And no, it's not a given that that'll occur. It's not a given that every story will have some sort of sappy ending to it and it'll be, oh, we were all just best buds forever and ever and ever. There are varying degrees to which these experiences are a success. In my own experience, there are people who predate me who are going to have different experiences with different players. The most compelling stories that I'd ever hear about St. Vincent College and life in the dorms and the evenings spent on the steps to a certain hall or outside the cafeteria came from that group that was comprised of Troy Polamalu, Brett Kiesel, Aaron Smith, Hines Ward, and all of those offensive linemen. And you know the group I'm referencing. And how a lot of these players, Troy in particular, would insist that regardless of where a player was on the depth chart or whether they were expected to even make the team out of camp, he wanted everyone at some point or other to understand what it meant to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, what it meant to those who came before him, what they passed on to him, and why he hoped to pass that on to them. My friends, whatever it is that you've ever thought about Troy in the most glowing possible terms as a player, as a person, or anything, multiply it by a factor of at least 43, because that's what he was to this franchise. And he wasn't alone. Different positional groups had different people. Coaches, of course, positional coaches, the ones who are closest to their players, would engage in this as well. And before I keep going here, I can tell that the only thing you're going to be wondering is, do they still do this? Is there still something like this out there? The answer to that is yes. It's changed according to more current players, but it's only changed in as much as society's changed, behavior's changed, the way in which to communicate has changed. And for this group, I really believe this. It's going to be as important as it's been in a long time. Why? Think about yesterday's show and what I talked about. Think about all those new starters, all those new players. Some of them, some really important guys, 3 of them in particular, in Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Ramsey, and Jonnu Smith, showing up so late in the summer that Rodgers was only around for minicamp, and Ramsey and Smith are going to be showing up for the first time. They've got to hit fast forward on this process. They have to go through it. There have to be people both able and willing to take them through that. And I think you're going to have to see leadership from players who weren't necessarily in that role previously. You want a couple of good examples? On defense, I'm going to take one here, and you might have a hard time buying this, but I'm going to take Patrick Queen. And yes, I understand this will only be year 2 for him in Pittsburgh, but PQ is now not just the green dot guy. If you think about it, he's now pretty much the only presence in the entire secondary. And really in 2025, we can refer to inside linebackers as part of the secondary more often than not, who's been around for any length of time in any kind of leadership role. And just as I remember relaying the story to you last year, PQ was being, I don't know if the word was indoctrinated, but it was something in that realm by Landon Roberts and a couple other guys. And I happened to be in their vicinity, and Landon actually asked me to share some Pittsburgh and Steelers stuff with PQ. I think that's now going to be on him. All of the training wheels are off with PQ. He and I talked about that at length at minicamp. No more excuses. No more I'm learning this. No more I'm getting used to what they want me to do in Pittsburgh. And that's not me saying that. That's him saying that. On offense, I'm gonna go with Pat Freiermuth. Now, the offense hasn't had a real culture type leader for some time. And understand, when I'm referring to a leader on offense, there is only one. That's Rodgers. Unquestionably, he has to be that. The description that I'm going for here is more of the culture guy, the Steeler guy. You know, Pat's been here. Pat's been through it. And Pat cares. Pat deeply, deeply cares. And he, like a lot of the rest of these guys who've never won a playoff game here, would really like to get around to winning a playoff game at some point. I think he's going to have a lot of the burden of bringing together a bunch of new parts at very important positions on the offense. When we come back, J1Q.
This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar.
A little bit of a confession to make before getting to the J1Q. I'm always a little bit leery. I'm not sure why of doing segments like that, opening one today. Because I don't know. I guess I get the sense that all anybody ever wants is this kind of rumor or that kind of speculation or the more bombastic hot take stuff or even the analytical stuff. And you know what? That's all fine. I do a lot of that. Well, I don't do the rumors and whatever, but I do the analytical stuff and X's and O's and positional and news. But, you know, when you're in that world, and I'm never really in it, as a reporter, you're never really in it. You're around them. You're invited in at times and you can communicate with them, but I'm not part of it. And I never pretend otherwise. I'm an outsider in every sense. But I do know what I hear from these people that matters to them. And when you hear it over so many years, and only the names and the personalities change, maybe you come to appreciate a little bit more how important it is. Say what you want, for example, about last season's team and how they finished. They did have a very productive, very encouraging, and very come-together camp. They went from being a team that was almost broadly expected to finish in last place to a 10-3 start. Anyway, stuff matters to me, so every once in a while I'll talk about it. Ryan Williams from Upper St. Clair has our J1Q and says, DK, in regards to WR2. What's the official deadline for obtaining one? In other words, when is the train leaving the station and becoming a moving train where it's apparently impossible for a receiver to get on board, referencing obviously Roman Wilson and Mike Williams? I don't believe that there is such a deadline, much less an official one. A lot of the names that I've broached on this show have been candidates to be moved by their respective teams a lot later in the preseason. Romeo Doubs in Green Bay is a perfect example of that. Packers drafted a bunch of guys at his position. Packers want to see what they have. The only way they can do that is by watching them at least in some exhibitions. And if you're the Steelers, the last thing that you'd want to do is go get somebody else, clog that spot, only to find out later that you could have had Doubs. And from there, if you consider that the position that he'd be playing would be, in this case, the opposite wideout from DK Metcalf, it's not anything that would be all new to him, and it's not as if learning the playbook would require some kind of thesis on the receiver's part. You brought up Williams, and I'll remind that Williams was pretty much just remembering where he'd park his car at the facility around the time that he caught that pass to beat the Commanders in Landover. And to revisit the Wilson thing for what feels like the bazillionth time, his moving train situation was about a lot of different things. It wasn't about passing up some kind of deadline. It was about taking a while to heal, having a setback to that healing from the injury, not necessarily having mastered the offense or his routes in that time that he was down. And not to be forgotten, this was an NFL rookie. He's attempting to graduate from the minor leagues to the major leagues. So to compare that to the kind of transition that someone like a Doubs would make, yeah, definitely not the same thing. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. We're going to have a double shot of Steelers today at 4 p.m. Eastern, live on our YouTube channel, and of course on both our app and website that you can find by looking up DK Pittsburgh Sports. Thanks so much for being here.